Hello and welcome. So this video I thought I would call The Higher Ground, The Moral Dilemma, and What Paracetamol Have You Been Taking? And not just what you've been taking, why you've been taking it, how you've been taking it. So the paracetamol is the information we're being bombarded with. So where shall I start? So let's step back and look at everything as if it was one thing. I think we need to start doing several things. Who's we? The church. So when I'm saying we, I mean the church. Sort of Christendom, but particularly for me, I'm focusing on the church as the body, but particularly as the bride of Christ and as the kingdom of God. So when I say we, I'm talking about the church. It's always going to be pretty much bride of Christ, kingdom of God, unless I correct that. So firstly, just step back and get that macro view. It's part of the issue. So everything that's happening is pulling us into a debate about that thing. And I think in the wider context of what is happening in the earth and what God's wanting to do in the earth through his church, through his people, through us, through his bride and his kingdom people. That's why I think of it like that. We're kind of getting dragged away from the bigger issues. And actually, what is it we actually need to do? I don't know how much you're on YouTube, how much you're on other social media channels. That's a big question. The answer's probably not as much as it should be. But the real critical thing, I think, in that is, and yes, I know I'm starting to waffle, is not what, it's not any other question really than what you're watching, what's getting your attention. But certainly we're being dragged into certain things. And the question is, are we starting to lose sense of the bigger issues? And is this basically part of the nature of our spiritual warfare? I think the answer is yes. So if you do watch, I think there's a lot of stuff. I think what you'll get from me, I hope, is yes, some clarity, but really, I think the questions actually are more important than the answers sometimes, because the answer is whatever you decide from the information you're given, and we'll all come up with something different. The point is not that our answers are different, it's that we've got the answers by doing the right thing in the right way, which is questioning the information. So I think that's why, to me, the questions are more important. So in that context, what are you doing with your time? Is it social media or not? And then what are you actually looking at? And then what effect does that have? That's a critical issue which we should have been dealing with for years and we haven't yet. And I guess it's so general it's not even talked about in the church, but I think we've got to start asking these questions, which is why I'm asking them. There are lots of questions, and it's narrowing the important questions from the unimportant questions. So if you followed from the recent video or videos I've been doing, so if you have, great. If you haven't, not. I'm just going to explain what I'm doing. So I put out a video up that got some traction about some allegation for some bigwig leader in some bigwig church, in some bigwig place, in the bigwig kingdom of God, or the bigwig church, bigwig bride of Christ. And the whole point of that was, go back and see the videos. But I kind of got lurid allegation fatigue. And if you've watched any of those videos, you'll know that my take on it is to ignore the actual allegations. But there were questions. So the questions there are, in that narrow event, and it is a narrow event, what lessons do we have to learn? I think there's lots of lessons. So I'm aware I need to do that, but I've got serious lurid allegation fatigue where I just need to not deal with that at the moment, that whole thing, because it's just got majorly out of hand. Actually, the whole point is it's dragging our attention into it, and we're losing our attention onto some big issues that I had wanted to talk about. So I'm going to focus on those and not focus on the lessons we've got to learn from those lurid allegations and that whole situation. But I'm aware I need to do that. So if you've come here from that, then, we're basically pausing that. I think I do need to step back and think carefully about what actually are the major lessons, because there's probably about 50 million, if I'm honest, and probably 50 we could probably talk about, but it's the top 5, 6, maybe even a dozen that need to be dealt with, and I'm not quite understanding at the moment what those are, because I'm getting sucked into the whole thing, and there's just more content each day and more lurid allegations, so I need to not get sucked into that. So I'm aware of that, which is why I'm doing that. Back to the point. So this video, did I say that? I can't remember. This video is called The Higher Ground, The Moral Dilemma, and What Paracetamol Have You Been Taking? I can't remember if I said that, to be honest. Anyway, so if I have, I'm sorry, but let's just recap. If I have, so the higher ground is, what is the higher ground? But to me, it's not a ideal, or it's not even a vision or something particularly, though partly it is. And it's not even a place, although partly it is. Really, it's a person. The most neglected thing in the kingdom of God is the king. So we need to draw our eyes back onto the king. And the king will help us to answer the moral dilemma. Anything moral. I mean, we're this whole war, we're being bombarded by moral questions. And I have to be honest with you, most of them are absolutely irrelevant. They're aimed to finally just confuse you. So I think this is another thing we need to realise when we step back. So the question is, are we deliberately being bombarded by the enemy, by stuff, so we get confused about what's what, and then that causes a paralysis? And the answer to me is yes. And part of the issue in the church in this last 2 years has been paralysis by different things, by COVID, by an attack on Judeo-Christian values, by an attack on this, by an attack on that, by what's going on, by this war, by the other war that's happening, just everything. And I think the lesson to learn, if we step back, is like not to be paralyzed. And even if we're confused, to not let that confusion lead to paralysis. But there's definitely a chain of events, which is very simple in my eyes. It's we live in an age of, well, the age we live in is an age of computer initiated, technological initiated information, which has led to a change in the season, in the age we live in, which is an age of information management. So the most important people and the most powerful people, actually, particularly in business, are people who are managing information. Now, why do I say that? Because that's my line of work, marketing, digital marketing. So I understand that perfectly. Like, it's all about getting data, getting information, and then communicating that information. And actually, more than just what you do with that information, it's how you aggregate the data to get insights into things. And the people that can do that have the advantage and can do powerful things. And not just in business, in society as well, because they have the information they need at hand to affect change. And that's an important process. Now, we've gone from that age of management to an age of mismanagement, because basically it's the age of misinformation, where we're bombarded by so much misinformation we are paralyzed. So that's a whole issue. And I'm not thinking about that, but everything I'm saying is kind of thinking about that without actually talking about that. But by not talking about that, I am talking about that, if you understand me correctly. So top point really is to get the right information from the right sources and to analyze it correctly, so we've got the right answer by answering the right questions, so we are not confused, so we're not in a state of paralysis. So bottom line is really, let's get out of this state of paralysis. Let's understand. We only understand by being on that higher ground, which is in relationship to Jesus. Not just Jesus Christ, Yeshua Mashiach, which is the same thing in Hebrew, which is the same thing but different things, if you understand that correctly. So that's important. So that's something else we need to do. If you don't understand that, don't worry. Same person. Really, ultimately, it's just how we perceive him. So again, don't be confused with the perception. Perceive him right. And then again, I think one of the issues with Western culture is it's far too black and white. And we need to not necessarily think about things and ask the question, am I right or wrong? Because we'll never be totally right and we'll never be totally wrong. So it's a pointless question. The real question is, how do I get more equated and more aligned with the truth and less with the lies in terms of misinformation? And that's a journey as well. We don't suddenly switch a light on and go, everything's perfect. Like that's a major problem in the church. A lot of what we teach is like, just particularly theologically, like there is an idea, let's switch the light on that idea, and then everything's solved. It's like, doesn't actually solve the issue. Partly, but not exclusively, but it's an important ingredient to that, because we confuse talking with doing. In classic Christian theological thinking, the Latin for right thinking is orthodoxy, and the Latin for right doing is orthopraxy. And classically, we actually say us Christians have got it right because we do the thinking correctly. And as opposed to the Jews, which is an interesting issue at the moment, because there's lots of Jewish issues at the moment, with the war in Israel, obviously, is like, if we get our doing right, then we've done it right. And there's this kind of clash, when the reality is, let's stop separating right doing from right thinking. One point, because going back to some videos I made previously about the allegations, again, I can't remember how much I've said about that in this video. I really do have fatigue about certain things. I've also tried to make this video 5 times and it always cuts out, so hey ho, it is what it is. So this issue of getting caught in sexual sin or a leader is not about right thinking, it's about right doing. So that would be the perfect example. So you'll hear Christians saying we need to theologically, and they might not use that word, but that's what they mean, think correctly. No, you need to understand that right thinking, so understanding theologically correct leads to right doing, and you can't right do without right thinking. So let's think carefully, let's get that right, let's understand why we think the way we do, and then let's allow that to progress into a journey of doing, not just thinking. One of the paralysis is in the church at the moment is there's a lot of talk and chatter. So we're traditionally used to a service, which is a bit of a joke, really, because it's like the average church service really hasn't progressed from the Dark Ages. Like, we're just doing what the Catholics were doing, but in a different way. So we don't have Gregorian chanting. We progress to hymns, and now we progress to drums, and now we progress to modern, and now we progress to, God forbid, but you know, this is what most worship services look like in most largish churches now. And in all churches, they just look bad because no one's worshipping, or in bigger churches, look like a entertainment and a performance, which isn't worship. And then the second part is, well, we have notices which bore us to death for 5-10 minutes, and then we have someone telling us how things are. And the part of the paralysis is we have, so I've got a TV remote I'm playing with. I'll stop doing that. Don't know if you can hear that. Anyway, getting back to the point. So we think all we need to do is say something on a pulpit, and that solves the problem. But actually, I twigged a long time ago, most people who listen to things said in church aren't listening at all. They're kind of bored to death. You know, go to the back of your church, look around, you know, look at what people are doing. They're not listening, they're not engaged. We're certainly, if we are, not. So the point there is the preacher preaches, and what do we do? The preacher assumes that, you know, he's done his thing, and that's all he needs to do, and that fixes the issue. But the point is, we barely listen, and if we listen, we don't really do anything about it. We don't think about it. If we do, it's not for long, and it affects no change at all. And kind of really, on the theological point, the preacher reinforces that by what he's actually preaching and what he's actually telling us. So there's always a point made about the cross, which I'm like, this point gets preached every Sunday almost, and in some churches every Sunday. It's like almost like the sub point or the major point. It's like that point's the whole point of Christianity. If we haven't got that yet, why the beep are we here? Which kind of annoys me. So yes, I am waffling. So let's get back to the point. So